Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Seth, psychologist, today with some couch commentary. And when I do couch commentary, I talk about something that's going on in current events or in pop culture from a psychological perspective. And today it is, wait for it, heated rivalry. That's what I want to talk about today. I finally gave in and watched this TV series, gave it a try, and I am so glad that I did. So, first, let's just start with what Heated Rivalry is. It is a television series that is created and written and directed by Jacob Tierney. And this is based on a series of books by Rachel Reed called Game Changers. This is it's become a viral sensation. These two main stars, Hudson Williams and Connor Story, play Ilya and Shane in the series. And these two actors have almost become like global sensations. I can't think of two actors who have kind of skyrocketed so quickly into the public consciousness in the same way that these two guys have. But from my sense of watching the show, every ounce of it is earned. The acting is so good. I had heard people talk about this show and I really resisted watching it. I thought it wasn't something that I'd really be interested in. I thought it might be really schmaltzy and just not something that I would like. And it completely surprised me. In fact, one word that I kept hearing people say about this show that actually got me to finally give it a try was the word beautiful. I heard people say it's really beautiful. And I thought, that's weird. I can't think of a lot of examples when people talk about shows in that way. And I think that's actually a good word for it. I was trying to think about other words. If I were trying to capture this show, what I think this show is in one word, kind of psychologically. Anybody who watches my videos, who subscribes to my channel, knows that I love words. I think words are so valuable. We can find the right word for something, and it can like be a straight zing to our heart or our brain because we can connect with it emotionally if we find the right word. Well, I was thinking about what are words to describe this show, and one word is just intense, intense in so many different ways. Another word is just moving. This show moved me emotionally. It actually moved me through so many different feelings. It was like a little bit of a roller coaster to watch this show. Another word I think is fascinating. It is, well, people call it a sports romance. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I resisted watching it in the beginning. I think a part of me was like, what the heck is a sports romance? Well, now I understand. And sports, hockey specifically, is sort of a subtext in the show. But how much do you need to like hockey to watch this show? Not much. Okay. Not much at all. In fact, there's very little footage actually of any hockey playing, but you can sense the competitiveness, the discipline that these athletes have. And that is definitely a major factor in the show. I'm not going to focus on the kind of element of competition in my points today because I think that's been really discussed enough in the media. But I will talk about a few points from a psychological perspective about why I think this show clicks, resonates with so many people all over. And I do believe that this is something there is something that gets triggered in us as viewers universally that makes this show so appealing to people all over. And in fact, you watching this right now, where are you watching from? It's always interesting for me and for other people who see the comments to see where people are experiencing this show from and kind of to share some of their own thoughts. So put a comment in the chat if you'd like where you are viewing this from. It really kind of underscores just what a universal experience kind of watching some of these intense shows really is. All right. The first point that I want to make about this show, the first sort of psychological point that really struck me, this show is full of yearning. Yearning. When I said earlier that I was trying to think about words that kind of capture the ethos, the kind of gestalt, the psychological sensibility of this series, Well, one of the words is yearning. You can tell these two main characters, Ilya and Shane, and also a couple of the other characters that are not as prominent in the series, you can tell they all experience some sort of yearning. And that yearning, I think, is something that's a really human experience that so many people in their own lives think for yourself in your own history. Have there been times in your life when you have ever wanted something, needed something, specifically emotionally, so badly that it actually turned into a yearning, almost like a thirst, that no matter how much water you drink, it can't fully get quenched? That's how deep the kind of need is. That's how long a certain emotional or psychological need may have gone unmet, that it creates this sense of yearning. Okay. So that's one of the most striking things that I sensed that is really reflected in this series. Another psychological factor that I saw is emotional unavailability. So I think that Shane and Ilya, what you see is you see two characters who really take turns being emotionally unavailable. There are times when one puts themselves out there and tries to seek out connection with the other in a real meaningful way. And the other really kind of casts the other away, holds the other at bay, and really resists that closeness and connection, is emotionally unavailable. But that lasts for a little while until the other then shifts into their own emotional unavailability, because you see, each character has their own triggers. Each character has their own vulnerabilities. And that is really another one of the central themes that I think this series really spotlights: vulnerability, and why we as viewers relate so much to the emotional experiences of these two characters. Vulnerability. So I think that one of the things that you see is a lot of Shane. His vulnerability relates to his kind of difficulty expressing his emotions, kind of reading the emotions of others and knowing how to kind of describe his own, maybe even recognize his own internally and then express them. You see, that's a real source of Shane's vulnerability. And then Ilya's vulnerability. So much of his vulnerability relates to sort of his cultural background. And you see some of the challenges with his father and being Russian. And he talks a lot about, at one point he says, if I were gay, basically, I couldn't go back. That's what he says. So vulnerability is a key theme. But again, why is this resonating with all of us? Because who can't relate to being vulnerable in some way or other in their life, especially in love? And when I say love, I don't just mean in romantic love. In any relationship that you have that's close, where you love, there is always some degree of vulnerability and risk, and even to some extent, getting hurt by the people that we love, because the stakes are so high. There is so much emotional investment. So, vulnerability, a definite key theme in this show, and another reason why it resonates with us. Another psychological theme that I saw in this series was kind of what goes unspoken in relationships, what sometimes can go unspoken in love. There are a lot of times where you see Shane and Ilya trying to talk, and they are face to face, and you know that each is feeling something strong and intense and really deep. And yet, certain words are not getting expressed. They're not actually often saying how they feel. So the unspoken words in that space between them, in those interactions, in the space between them, what goes unsaid, it becomes an enormous canvas that we as viewers can kind of project onto it all sorts of thoughts and feelings. We as viewers are kind of imagining exactly what Shane is feeling, or we are thinking what we want Ilya to say next, in that space between, in all of those unspoken words. And you know what? Again, in every single everyday relationship people watching this can have, Think yourself. How many times someone in your own life, whether it's a family member or a romantic partner or a good friend, how many times have you thought about saying something emotional to them, or maybe saying something about how you feel about them, good or bad, angry or loving and warm, and you haven't said it? The words that go unspoken, a definite theme here in this show. Now, that point also relates to, I think, one of the things that clicks the most with viewers, and that is the facial expressions of these two actors. These two actors have some of the richest facial expressions. There is so much written on the tons of muscles in the face. Think in a way, for example, about one's face being like a little gymnast that can create all sorts of expressions using all the different muscles in the face. And the expressions on these two faces of the characters, they are so rich. And the camera allows sometimes a few added seconds on each of the characters as maybe the other walks away or after the other says something. And the camera will stay on that facial expression. And we get to see in that facial expression the rich palette of what is actually going on behind those cheeks, behind those eyes, behind that mouth, what thoughts that brain is having, what's going on inside. It's fascinating. The facial expressions are really amazing in these characters. And one of the things that I would say is, I have no expertise whatsoever in acting or in how acting teachers would train actors. But one of the things that I would say is, I can imagine if I were going to teach acting, one of the things that I would really focus on is facial expressions, is really helping a new, young, budding actor connect with what their face emotes. Because again, just like earlier, I was speaking about some of the unspoken words, the face can speak so much without speaking at all. And the final point that I want to make is one that I think is maybe one of the more important points, and that's this one. There is talk about a lot of the physical component of this series, and particularly in, for example, the first couple of episodes, there is a lot of physical connecting between these two main characters. And yet, the physical component, while that is significant in some of the episodes, actually what I believe is causing this sort of viral reaction in the audience is actually the emotional component. As overt and pronounced and intense some of the physical moments are between some of these characters in the TV series, that it's actually more the subtext, the emotional content that is actually what's truly intense. The physical component is just sort of like an easy thing to, get focused on and tell yourself that that's really the primary thing that's going on. But underneath all that physical desire, that physical yearning, that physical energy is emotion, is unmet need, is wanting to connect. And this show, I have loved this series. I can't believe it's only 6 episodes. It's not enough. I think you sort of fall in love with these characters, but maybe because you can relate to so many of the experiences they have, even though on the surface, so many of their actual behaviors aren't ones that you have engaged in yourself. A really brilliant show. I've loved it. I hope that you give it a chance too, if you haven't seen it yet. Heated Rivalry is from Crave and is on HBO.